Welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Learning Podcast. I'm excited about today because we're going to try doing a new format where we're going to have Elizabeth Heggie, who's part of the K-12 team in Texas, as a co-host. Elizabeth, how are you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, doing good, Kevin.
So you haven't been professionally trained as a podcaster, just like I have not been professionally trained as a podcaster. So we're just going to call this like on the job training. And we're going to pull in our guest here, Michael Valencia, who's superintendent in Texas. Michael, how's it going?
It is going well. I'm happy to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, we're happy that you're joining us. We always want to have the perspective of like the current school leaders of what's going on, because our audience is really scattered, and between kind of architects that are working on building and designing new schools, and then through our affiliation with the Association for Learning Environments, but then also with our leadership organization, Education Leaders Organization. We want to hear like those things that are keeping you up at night. So before I get your whole story, I want to have Elizabeth give a little bit of kind of your story, a little bit of your background, so people understand your perspective. They're doing. How'd you get into this world serving education?
I've worked in the school districts for about 17 years. I have been with K-12 for about 5 months, so I'm new to this part in education. But I actually started in the yearbook and photography world, and I did that for a long time. And then I kind of ventured into the ed tech world, and then I found this amazing company, K-12. Found a good home here, and I'm excited to continue what I love doing in the schools. I feel like I really make a difference working in the schools, and so I love it. So I'm glad that I can continue that. So that's just a little bit about me and my background.
Perfect. Yeah, that'll help when you chime in with with your kids' stories too, and all those personal stories impact in there. All right, so Michael, why don't you give your background? I want to hear, what was school like for you when you were going through school?
I grew up with a teaching mom and a teaching dad. My dad went back and forth West Texas, so he was oil field. He was teaching oil field. But education was the priority, and so I had the typical, if you will, education. I played the sports and went to school. Going to school was, you had to be there more than you had to miss, because if you miss school, you might miss something, a small school type of mentality. So school was great for me. But again, growing up with education professionals, it was something that I had to take serious. But at the same time, they gave me the freedom to explore the way I wanted to. I won't tell you that I was the best student in the school system, and which I tell students now. If you think you're the first to try it, I probably already did. I enjoyed school, and it was almost like this was going to be my path, and I knew that. Even when I went to college not to do this, I still found my way back to it. But to me, it's the greatest profession in the world, and I love every second of what we do.
What was a moment for you that you're like, oh, this is what how'd you know? Was it was it before college that you like knew that was the track you were going to go?
Being completely honest, it was when I played my last football game. It was a loss in the playoffs, and I said I can't give this up. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna be a coach and a teacher, and I'm gonna coach forever. So that's what I did. I coached for the first 12, 13 years of this profession. Didn't have any desire to go into administration. But I had a great leader that kind of pushed me that way, and it was one of those opportunities where if I didn't take it, I didn't know when the next one would come, and that's how I even got into the whole administrative part of things. So, that's you never know. You never know. I thought I didn't know that I was going to do anything else besides coach. That was what I was going to do. But having great people in your lives and your profession leading you kind of opens your view to other things and things you can accomplish.
Yeah. How about you, Elizabeth? What was school like for you?
I actually my mother taught also, and she taught at my high school. So that was super fun. Couldn't get in trouble because mom was at the high school. But that's honestly how I kind of ended up in this school industry. So I didn't want to teach. I, love teachers. They have all the patience in the world. I don't. But I wanted to be in that kind of realm. And my mother was a high school journalism, yearbook, and photography teacher. She taught for, 30 years and retired. But when I graduated from college, I needed a job. And so her yearbook rep just happened to be in her room. And she was like, hey, my daughter's looking for a job. And he said, oh my gosh, we need somebody. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this world, having a mother that taught in schools. So
Isn't it amazing, those decisions that happen that point you in one direction in life. I had I came from a family of educators too, but I had zero interest in school. I was kind of like you. I'm like, I was really good at like figuring out how to get by. Like I was pretty good at like multiple choice tests and pretty good at figuring out like what I needed to do to to get a B in a class. And now I'm seeing in my kids that way too, of trying to just like figure it out. But I never thought I would do anything professionally, like in the educational world.
No, it's not for everyone, that's for sure. My husband actually taught 6th grade math for 1 year. So Michael, he was like on the same path as you. He wanted to be a coach. He went to A&M and got a degree in like sports management. And he went and taught 6th grade math for 1 year and was like, forget it. So now he's a pilot.
It worked out, it truly is wonderful. But I will tell you, I spent I was the principal at elementary for 3 years, and my admiration for those teachers at that level is sky high, because I was secondary, I was high school my entire time of teaching, so I didn't know that world very well. So it takes special people to do each level. It takes special people.
So true.
Michael, I want to hear like what's it like right now, and I think the question that I set up earlier is really helps people who are not in your role understand, like, what are the things that keep you up at night right now in your role as superintendent?
There's a lot, and I'll be very specific to what we are. We're a small school. We have about 550 students in our district, 150 of those in the high school. And the really what, and I was a high school principal for 4 years here at McCamey prior to being in this seat now. And the things that really bothered me then and still bother me today are, are we providing as many opportunities as we possibly can for our kids in a small school? When you look out there and you see, bigger schools having bigger opportunities. So that was something that's always been on my mind. That's something that's troubled me. And I'll tell the story quickly. But given my background earlier, I had this thought that every student was going to go to college, and that's what they wanted to do. And so when I was high school principal, I made all students apply for college. Apply for your financial aid, apply for college. And I had a student come to me, and he told me, he said, Mr. Valencia, I'm going to do this because you're asking me to do this. He said, but I'm not going to college. And in that moment, it made me realize that just because that's my view doesn't mean that's what each one of these students is going to do. And then it made me step back to say, I failed him because I wanted him to do something he didn't want to do. So did I prepare him for what he was about to walk into the world and do? So those are the things that really, and for me personally, have kept me up to make sure that I understand every student and what their goal is, but also did I prepare them for that? And I take the word I as have I done everything I can? But, as a system, as a school district, have we done everything we can possibly do? And then that ventures down into every grade level. You can be specific to every grade level when you talk about those things. And the other thing that I'll say to that is, in an age where we're short in professionals, I is the school system, school district, and this one in particular, doing everything it can to make our teachers have the best experiences possible as well. Because my belief is that if we get the best out of every one of our professionals, then our kids get the best opportunities. So, those are the things that just keep me going, keep me motivated, keep me driving towards making everything better rather than being complacent or content with where we are.
Yeah, it always makes me think too of similar, like anything. If you take care of the people that are taking care of the people, if you do that, if you set the kind of the right culture, it's such an interesting role, which is why I always love like hearing kind of the insights of it. Like how much intentionality, or what are those things that you can kind of intentionally do to kind of set that culture? Because we all know like schools are the heartbeats of our communities. It really impacts not just the staff there, it impacts all the families around, and then the general community all the way down to their the value of the real estate in the area. What are those things that you do where in an area where the school is so ingrained into the community?
Sure, and that's something that, as a matter of fact, I had a meeting on Monday with what we call our leadership team, and exactly with what you're talking about is we're only as good as the people that we have around us, and how do we make sure and guarantee that we're doing that? And of course, I wouldn't be saying things that aren't true, but obviously, in a small district, are we able to increase salaries like we want to? That's something that's a conversation in Texas all the time, and as those things happen, we have to stay up to date with that. But can we compete as a small district? How creative can we be with our calendar? That's something that how do we take advantage of the time that we have, but also make it productive for our people and our students to learn? For instance, is being specific to us again, but is a Friday afternoon during a travel day during football, is it a successful academic time? Maybe not. So how do we be creative in saying, let's take advantage of some other time besides that time, because we're going to lose a lot of people during that time. Students are gone traveling, coaches are gone traveling. How do we maximize that? So we got to be creative there. And then you go to people and specifically people, how do you make sure that each one of them feels valued, important, and with what they're doing? And it all goes down to relationships. Right? Do we know our people? Do we know what motivates them? Do we know what makes them tick? And that's a challenge I put on our leadership team, but also at the same time, we put on each other. What is our goal? What is individual goal? But what does the big picture look like? And we have to communicate that. There's, and I'm painting a whole picture, but there's a lot of specifics that go into each one of those things. We have 3 campuses, which is kind of unique for us because, as small as we are, we still have 3 different campuses. So we run them as 3 different campuses, but in reality, we're one district trying to create the same culture on each one of those. But you have 3 different principals in charge of those. So, making sure that it starts there and we trickle all those ideas down. But also not ever underestimating the importance and value that the school district has in a community our size, because we, the district, can make this community even better because everything kind of runs through the school district. We have a great community, that supports us, supports our facilities and expansion. We passed a bond last November, the November before, because they understand the importance to academics for our kids. So you put all that into one big whole idea, and it's not just a school district; it becomes a community in a whole.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And so when you had like something like that, where the community is it something you have to convince the community to, like that bond that you're talking about of the expansion? or is the community been pretty supportive?
We have a very, very supportive community. So I wouldn't say it was a persuasion per se, but more of a giving them the facts of why these things are needed. Because if they're going to have to make that decision if they want to vote yes or not. So the idea was, let's give them all the facts, and that way, no matter how they vote, at least they're voting on the facts and not anything else that we've tried to manipulate. Here's exactly what it is, and this is why we're trying to do it. We had town hall meetings. You put all that information out as much as you possibly can, so that it's an educated vote and nothing less than that. And don't get me wrong, a lot of energy, a lot of work that goes into that. But when you got, again, you go back to a team of people. When you have an architect, and you got a financial advisor, and you have a construction team that comes together and is able to provide that information that the community wants. Of course, it goes down to tax dollars, but you're providing it. As long as we're honest and transparent, that was our goal there.
It is definitely interesting seeing different districts, and then obviously like the geography of regions around the country. With Texas, obviously football is like ingrained. I mean, Elizabeth, I'm sure you've seen that too. Of just like it's hard to separate it, isn't it?
It is. There's been tons of huge stadiums being built and money going into the sports, arena. And I think that some, like to your point with the bond, I think some school districts have learned that kind of needs to be maybe separated a little bit. And, really let the community know, like, this is why we need this. Like, we need a new building, or we need, rather than we're just going to dump millions of dollars into a new stadium. So,
yeah, is that part of your initiative right now?
Actually, not
abilities, or is that more on the education?
Ours is very specific. Well, I have to mention, we resurfaced a track that we had, but that was let me take it back. We had a practice field. We have a game field that's turfed and in a beautiful stadium. Right next to it, we had a track with a field, a football field, but it wasn't turfed. It was by that point, it was a dirt field. So we did turf that and resurface the track. But the main focus, that was just a very small part of it. The main focus was a new high school. So we'll have a new high school, a new administration building. Now, again, also in that, we aimed big. We had big picture in mind here, but we were also building a new gymnasium. So it was a combination of things. But if the focus for us was an academic setting that had an infrastructure that could provide the best opportunities for our students, and the other things were needs. But that was the number one thing on our agenda, was to get a new high school, and thank goodness our community understood that.
Yeah. So how many students are actually in your school district?
We have 500. A few years ago, we were about 570. We've been as low as 490. Right now, we're anywhere between 5 and 550.
And I think having that size district too, when you start comparing, is some other districts, they may be looking like, oh, we have like a communications director. We have somebody like who like even some will have like an architect on staff, and others are going to have all these additional roles to kind of help. And I'd love to hear your perspective, because when it is kind of a smaller district, you get all of those roles in there, from politician to communications to everything in there. Has it been surprising for you, or like what's it like kind of having that many hats that you have to wear?
Sure, and it's definitely a challenge depending on the scenario, right? Each day is a different hat. Each day is the same hat, but I make the joke, we also own housing properties where we have school housing for our teachers. So I never thought that I would ever have landlord on any sort of documentation or resume or property manager. But it's all of those hats. But again, that goes back to who you put around you. And the trust that you have in those people, and allowing them, because there may be something they know better than I do, but although that decision may have to come from this seat, having others to bounce those ideas off of, or have a team to say, hey, this is what we're facing, whether it be transportation or bus routes, or like you said, facilities department. We don't have a facilities department. That's when we talk about building new buildings. I'm that's this seat is that as well. But I am no way in construction whatsoever. So you got to build that team around you and have the right people. And I always love the challenge of trying to be better at something. So I think every day I get that challenge.
Is there a certain part of the job that you're like, if I can get rid of this, I would get rid of this? Or if there's something like, if I could just do this, I would love to just do this all the time.
I get myself in trouble if I probably answered that, but what I say about this position for me, and this is just my personal opinion, is you can have your days scheduled. But it's always what walks through the door that most of the time takes priority, because it's either a situation you got to take care of, or like a person that you need to attend to, or a student, or a parent, or those things end up being the reality of priority in those moments. So that part of it is just the unknown, and that's maybe my best way to answer that is if I could always know what I was facing, every day would be wonderful. But I promise you this: there's more great days than there's not. So no matter what walks through the door, we could always handle it.
Yeah, well, that was a good answer. Because trouble there.
No. There might have been a few thoughts that came to mind. I just left them there.
Yeah,
landlord might be one that would have come to mind for me.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well, that's what's always been fascinating is we've had this involvement with this education leaders organization, and it's this like confidential peer group where you have like 6 to 10 of your peers around the country to be able to be like those things that like I may not be able to say it in front of everyone, but there's things that I need to figure out like as part of my role, and it's really fascinating to hear those conversations of things that they're struggling with, and it's always the personal stuff.
Sure.
It's that you're a real person. You got a real life. You got a family too.
Yeah,
you got a big role, but it doesn't mean like all those real life things aren't happening, and you have to process and deal with them as well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up, the question I would love to hear from you is, what advice do you have for somebody who is going down that path of administration or into leadership, the things that maybe you didn't understand when you were going into that you would have to deal with and have to think about and be the leader? What would that advice be for that up and coming administrator?
I'll start with something you kind of touched on right there is don't forget to take care of yourself, because you're only going to do a great job if you're in a great place. So I think that's very, very important. The other thing that I think I learned rather early on, and again, may have just been in where I was at the time, but when you grow up in I'm using again West Texas, for example, it was almost always my town against their town, or it was always a rivalry. It was always, I can't talk to them because they're not on my side or my team. But I believe that education is the greatest fraternity that there is. So there's always somebody that's been through something you've been through or going through, or have already accomplished something that you're trying to accomplish, or have the same idea. So don't ever hesitate to make that phone call, ask that question. There's not anybody in this profession that I know that's going to laugh or find it funny that you have a question or something that you're trying to make better for your place. Because although in my mind they were against me because they weren't on my team or in my school district, everybody wants everybody to succeed. And I didn't understand that at a younger age, and I really understand. And I tell my own personal kids the story all the time is when I went to compete, no matter what, if it was checkers or Connect Four or whatever, I wanted to win. And I'm not very good at golf. And I went golfing with a coaching friend of mine, and I went there to beat him. And I'm not good, but he cheered me on the entire day. And I left there that day thinking, I've been approaching some of my professionalism the wrong way. I was competing to beat people instead of cheering people on all the time, like he did me, knowing he was going to win, knowing that I didn't know how to play golf. So he's one of the ones, and I don't even know where he is today. And I wish that now I'm going to go reach out to him. But he's one of the guys that made me think different about what I'm doing. Is I need to be the biggest fan I can possibly be, because somebody else needs me just like I need them. So that would be my advice to everybody. Cheer everybody on, but at the same time, don't be afraid to venture out there, ask questions, and communicate with anybody and everybody you can.
Yeah, that's exactly why I think I gravitate and love working in education. It's like, if we're all better at our jobs, everyone wins. There's no losers in it, so there's no reason why we wouldn't want to help each other succeed.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time. For the listeners out there, just make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening. And betterlearningpodcast.com is kind of our hub for everything, including where we get a lot of our ideas of topics and guests that we should have on here. Michael, you were great. We wanted to have you on because we wanted to hear that perspective, because we always are trying to combine and be able to kind of break down the silos that happen in education, like what you talked about. We want to make sure that people understand each perspective as we're doing this, because a lot of times we're working with architects that are building schools and they're looking at it from one perspective. Other times we're bringing on teachers and change makers that are looking at it from a different perspective. And we need to be breaking down those silos and making sure that everyone's communicating together, because at the end of the day, we all want the best thing for each kid. And that's what we're striving for. So that's really the common theme that we have throughout the podcast. Thank you for your time, Elizabeth. First one is down.
Funny.
The views and opinions expressed in the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and of my guest, and do not necessarily represent the organizations we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.